productivity and boosts economic growth. Nosipho Khatebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, the case before the Constitutional Court concerned whether the dismissal of various employees who continued working beyond their retirement age was automatically unfair under South Africa's Labour Relations Act, or the LRA. In deciding this question, then the Constitutional Court had to decide between two conflicting interpretations of retirement age defence set out in the LRA, which essentially allows an employer to fairly dismiss an employee if they have reached the normal or agreed upon retirement age. Well, for more clarity on this matter, we have roped in Mr. Justin Hatting, Strata-g Labour Solutions Senior Legal Advisor, to help us understand and also give us clarity on retirement age as well as legal uncertainty. Justin, a very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us on the show. So firstly, and very important, right, how can both employers and employees navigate these legal uncertainties surrounding a retirement age, especially in industries without a mandatory retirement policy? Because we understand that South Africa, there is no law in South Africa that actually mandates a specific retirement age for all employees.
Good afternoon, Alicia. Thank you for having me. Yes, I think the most important thing here when we speak about retirement age, especially when there is no certainty, is to create certainty by implementing, a policy or a contract which is going to state, well, this is what's going to happen when you reach specifically 65, 60, whatever it might be. And then, everyone will know what to expect when, you reach that age.
And what are then the best practices for ensuring fairness in the workplace, Justin, when handling these very sensitive retirement-related discussions as well as decisions?
Yes, ultimately, any sort of termination needs to be for a fair reason, so substantively fair, and then also a fair process needs to be followed. So there needs to be procedural fairness. Ultimately, what's going to have to happen is employers need to state, well, look, at the end of the day, when you reach 65 or whatever it might be, this is what's going to happen. You'll be able to either work until the end of the month you reach 65 or your retirement age, or, when you get to that point, we're going to have a discussion with you. We're going to say to you, well, look, you're coming up for retirement. Give the employee an opportunity to make their submissions and then ultimately consider those submissions. And then once you've considered those submissions and you make your decision, then communicate it. So, there needs to be, as I said, a fair process, and there needs to be a fair reason. Because ultimately, if we're going to just terminate someone on the basis of their age, it could be an automatically unfair dismissal, and you could end up going to, the labor court and then finding yourself in a bit of a difficult situation as an employer.
Absolutely, Justin. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying this is all dependent purely on a company policy as to whether or not they actually do set that legal retirement age between themselves and then their employees.
Yeah, so ultimately, yes, as I said, it's very important by actually agreeing to a retirement age. But if you don't have an agreed retirement age, then you're going to have to look at an industry norm. So what is the usual practice there? If there's nothing like that, then you would actually go into your pension or provident fund rules and see what they say is the retirement age when you're going to be able to then claim that benefit.
All right. Thank you so much for that clarity. Then how can employees then protect their rights, Justin, if they feel pressured to actually retire earlier than they are legally required to? Because let's face it, reality is that we as a country have deeper employment issues, Justin, in that not everyone can actually either retire comfortably come retirement age or even retire come retirement age. So what happens when somebody actually wants to continue working due to any of these above-mentioned reasons?
Yeah, so as you've noted, we do live in a situation where the actual retirement age is probably 80 now because of, the cost of living and actually not having proper financial savings or whatever it might be. So I think what needs to happen in that situation is employees then need to, speak to their employers, get that clarity. And if they feel that they are being forced to retire based on their age, then what happens is, as I said before, it becomes an automatically unfair dismissal, especially when there's no agreement. And then they would be able to approach not only the CCMA, but the labour courts as well in order to enforce those rights.
Let's further expand on those legal frameworks, Justin, that actually do exist in order to balance an employer's workforce planning needs with an employee's rights to continue working past a certain age.
Yeah, so ultimately, when it comes to enforcing your rights, as I said, you need to approach your employer. You need to make sure that there is a proper agreement in place. And then if you're going to work past retirement, what employers can do as well is then enter into a new agreement, maybe a fixed term agreement. They would then be able to say, well, look, we're going to then put you on a fixed term agreement for another 5 years or whatever it might be. And the purpose of that would be to then obviously make sure that there's proper succession planning in place. You're going to then train your newcomers in the workforce and then make sure that they're capacitated. So it's always about having the discussion, having proper agreements in place, and making sure that there is clarity.
Absolutely. And how can then companies create clear as well as fair retirement policies that actually align with the labour laws, Justin, while also respecting the employee's financial as well as personal circumstances? Because think about it, you've been with this employer for over 50 years. They have to take into account your home as well as living condition.
100%. So as I said before, it's really a matter of putting proper policies in place, proper agreements in place. What you'd be able to do is then speak to any sort of proper labour broker, or sorry, not labour broker, but labour advisor, and they would be able to then guide you and make sure that your policies align with what the law says and that you ensure fair procedures.
And are you seeing a reluctance in people, Justin, that are actually supposed to be what we call nearing that retirement age, actually wanting to retire due to discrepancies, due to the retirement packages that could be affected essentially by even that early forced retirement?
Absolutely. So there is a lot of reluctance. I have seen it before. And what happens is it usually comes down to the cost of living and not having proper retirement savings in place. So there are people that are going to then try and work past their retirement age. But as I said before, it really comes down to having that proper discussion with employees before they get there.
And let's talk about those sectors, the different sectors that don't necessarily do have a certain retirement age, Justin. What happens in that regard? Can a 90-year-old still come to work under the prefix that they can still actually do their duties?
Well, I think what it really comes down to is because we have that, people are living longer, we've got better medical care, so they're feeling like they've got that energy, they can continue to work. But I think it really becomes an issue of safety. So where someone is not going to be able to actually work past that retirement age, what we need to do then is make sure it's still safe for them to work. They're still medically fit to do that. And, we need to have those discussions. We need to look at the situation. So if it's a more corporate job, if it's more sedentary, people could possibly work past retirement age. But I mean, if we're going to have someone that's going to be in their 90s in the manufacturing sector, that might actually pose a health risk and a safety risk. So I think it really comes down to balancing, the employee's ability as well, and also what the industry requires.
Thank you so much for that input as well as clarity. That was Mr. Justin Hattingh, the Senior Legal Advisor at Strata-g Labour Solutions.